I think fear is my favorite tactic I've seen the processed food industry use to scare people away from eating a whole foods diet, especially animal products, and into eating more and more of their processed foods. We see this most commonly with the claims that red meat will cause cancer. We've seen this all too much with that claim, a claim that is, on its face, nonsense if you accept the sort of scientific basis or the scientific claims about how long human beings have been on the planet and where we come from. If you accept those claims in any form, then you will probably find, if you think about it at all, the claims that red meat causing cancer to be nonsense. And not just nonsense, but nonsense on stilts, because humans have been eating, as in our hunter-gatherer phase of our history, according to the archaeology, we were eating red meat, ruminant animals for centuries, millennia. We're talking tens of thousands of years, if not longer. And according to the contemporary research trying to sell you on a plant-based diet, all of our ancestors should have died from cancer, which is not how they went out. Most of them didn't. The ones who made it out of childhood went out in accidents or died as elders in their communities. That's just what the archaeology says. They didn't go out from colorectal cancer like the article I'm going to show you here says today. Why do they use fear? Because fear is effective. And because for all those who say politics in the food community talk is bad, fear is a political tool. That's what it is. And that's what we're talking about here, is the politics of food. Politics is in everything, whether we want to admit it or not. And so you see the common tactics of politics being brought to the food industry. If a politician gets up on stage and says, if you take the person I'm running against you and you give them the office I want, they're going to destroy the world, or some other silliness. We're used to that. We're used to that be stupidly hyperbolic commentary, stupidly hyperbolic way of selling you on themselves. When we see it in the food, but the food industry does this too. They just bring it down to your own level. They say, well, eating red meat causes the thermometer problems of the world that they tell us this is a huge problem to get worse and worse and worse, when there's no evidence of that actually being true in terms of the impact animals have on the environment. In fact, the evidence is the inverse of that is actually more likely to be true. But they do that on that sort of macro scale of fear, or they do it through a different way, a different kind of fear. And that's that your personal world will end if you eat red meat. Why? Well, as this one article shows you here, we get stories like this so frequently they're almost not worth commenting on. But this one is making the rounds right now. So, headline from The Guardian: plant-based diet can cut bowel cancer risk in men by 22%, says study. Researchers find no such link for women, suggesting connection between diet and bowel cancer is clearer for men. Do you believe that? Do you believe that eating beef every day, mostly beef or lamb, is going to shorten your life and give you make you more susceptible for one of the more painful ways to go out? And we all pay the piper in the end. Do you think eating red meat is the cause of this? Come on. Immediately you can see what they're doing here. These, quote, researchers are repeating the tired old line that eating red meat causes cancer, which is pretty weird since, again, human beings have been eating red meat since the beginning, basically, without this happening on a large scale. It's just that these problems became much larger in the last century and a half. And nobody ever asks really why that is. Typically studies like this compare plant-based, hyper-processed food diets versus the standard American diet without ever really controlling for processed foods. They never take them out of the equation. They never say what happens if you go put someone on a Whole30 diet, like a whole foods, no processed foods version of the standard American diet. No one ever does that with these studies. And why is that? You should ask yourself that question, because, well, this is a carnivore diet channel where I advocate that you go to a meat-only, ruminant-heavy diet to control whatever maladies that you have in your life and to lose the weight you need to lose. We all agree that a whole foods, non-processed food diet is just remarkably better than anything going on in the broad world right now. And you don't see that being brought into the research programs, and it kind of, you should be asking yourself why that is. This study here isn't any different. So here's from The Guardian, quote, eating a plant-based diet rich in vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and legumes can reduce the risk of bowel cancer in men by more than a fifth, according to research. A large study that involved 79,952 U.S.-based men found that those who ate the largest amounts of healthy plant-based foods, there's poisoning the well there, had a 22% lower risk of bowel cancer compared with those who ate the least. The researchers found no such link for women, of whom 93,475 were included in the research. The team suggests that the link is clearer for men who have an overall higher risk of bowel cancer. Their findings were published in the journal BMC Medicine. For the research, people were asked how often they ate certain foods and drinks from a list of more than 180 items. They were also asked about portion size. Participants could tick that they consumed each food item never or hardly ever, right up to 2 or more times a day. For drinks, the responses range from never or hardly ever to 4 or more times a day. The food groups were classed as healthy plant foods, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, vegetable oils, nuts, legumes such as lentils and chickpeas, tea, and coffee. Less healthy plant foods, refined grains, fruit juices, potatoes, added sugars, and animal foods, animal fat, dairy, eggs, fish, or seafood, meat, end quote. They don't really control here for processed foods. You notice that. They don't, take out of the group the people who ate a large amount of processed food and examine them in more depth. They just ask people if people ate that stuff or not and how frequently they ate that stuff. If I was part of their human subjects control board here, which every university has, I don't know if you know how this works, but at universities is where most of this research is done through research grants from the food industry or from the government or some other interested organization, maybe health insurance companies. And the way this really works is the researcher comes up with an idea, maybe gather some preliminary data to show why the research is needed. They write up a research proposal. They submit it both for the grant funding and they also for human subjects testing. Human subjects testing is an oversight board because we've all heard these infamous stories about horrible experiments done on people back in the 30s and the 40s and things, where we learned a lot of things, but the research was evil. The way they were causing harm to get their data. And the universities all put in human subjects testing boards to make sure that if you did research involving human beings, you had to get permission to do it to make sure everything you were doing was ethical. 100% support that. And if I was on their human subjects board and I saw this coming to me, I would have shredded this study. And that's the other thing that the human subjects board do is give you feedback on study design, on your research design. And so you're having a survey response study. That's what this is, survey responses. I don't remember if it wasn't for the carnivore diet, I wouldn't remember what I ate yesterday. Because either I eat something, the same thing basically every day, like most of you do, so I don't do too many of those here's what I ate in a day or eat in a week videos because it's more or less the same thing most of the time. But I either remember what I ate because it was just basically the same thing I eat most of the time, or I deviated from it and ate something unusual, like we got a whole pig from a friend at my church and it only cost like $200 or something, $300 for the whole thing. And I had a big section of pork loin that I put in my grill yesterday. It was fantastic. And I only really remember that I had that yesterday because I usually don't eat that much pork. So otherwise, I don't remember what I ate like a week ago. Couldn't tell you. And yet here they have these how often do you eat this stuff kind of things. And most people couldn't tell you. And then here's the other part about that. When it comes to health, people will notoriously lie. We'll lie about political surveys we get over the phone, and we'll lie about nutrition and health. People really think they eat healthier than they do. Think about it this way. Have you ever started a diet and you said, okay, I'm going to just say I eat this much because in your mind, you honestly believe you only ate a cup of rice a day or whatever. And then you actually went and measured how much you would eat, and it was way more than that. You ever had that happen? I did. Back in my portion control days, I was eating way more than I thought I did as a baseline. When I would cut down to what I thought was the appropriate amount, it was still far more than I was eating. Point being, these kind of surveys are garbage. They don't tell you anything. The research design for this stuff should have been laughed out of the room before it was authorized by human subject testing. But of course, this was a funded study. They always are. And you have to ask yourself, where did the funding come from? And that's one of the things I wish peer-reviewed journals would tell you. They never tell you where the money for the research came from. Maybe we need that kind of reform of medical research. Probably won't happen, though. We don't, they say that sunshine is the best form of disinfectant. Well, this is one area where they don't want sunshine. They like things just the way they are. What other flaws do you see with this assumption, this study that they're pushing here? Let me know in the comments what you thought of this. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It really does help. As to sharing this on social media, that helps a lot as well. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore. Thanks for tuning in.